crime story.
The true story of William Corder. A tale entwined with love, murder, and an apparition. The infamous Polstead case of 1827 reads like a classic English detective story set against the backdrop of a quaint barn with its rustic red-tiled roof. Having perused numerous narratives of this gripping account, it has become evident that the full tragic scope of the story remains concealed in the shadows. Indeed, many crucial details have been swept aside, and fanciful embellishments often mar the truth. Armed with diligent research, my endeavor is to recount this narrative with unwavering honesty, utmost integrity, and a commitment to impartiality. Beginning of life. Born in 1803 in the picturesque village of Polstead, nestled in Suffolk County, England, William Corder was the second of 3 sons born to the prosperous farmer, John Corder. In those days, the rigid English inheritance rules dictated that William would not inherit the family farm, a fact that cast a shadow over his future. Furthermore, his father took pains to ensure that young William remained well aware of his place and frequently subjected him to ridicule and taunts. This constant derision only served to fortify the lad's character, rendering him far from an obedient child. William's educational journey commenced at the local school before he spent the subsequent 3 years at a private high school. It was here that he earned the moniker Foxy for his unique blend of intelligence and cunning. The young Corder's gift for writing began to shine at school, and he nurtured aspirations of a career as a journalist, teacher, or even a writer. However, his father harbored no intentions of funding such endeavors, dismissing them as nonsense. Consequently, upon completing his studies, William found himself compelled to return to the family farm, a path he was reluctantly obliged to tread. Criminal career. Legends and a plethora of rumors swirl around William's involvement in a series of minor transgressions during this period. Yet, the exact motivation behind these infractions remains elusive, whether rooted in his personal inclinations, defiance against his father's authority, or a deliberate ploy by his parents to saddle their middle son with blame. It is also plausible that these tales only surfaced in the wake of the tumultuous events of 1827. The allegations against William typically revolved around cattle theft, with his own father being the sole accuser. On one occasion, he contended that William was tasked with selling their hogs at market but returned with a forged check instead of the expected funds. It is a challenge to accept the words of a man who treated his own son with such prejudice, neglecting his talents and aspirations. Hence, when scrutinizing William's life from an external vantage point, one might conclude that most of these stories likely emerged after he had become a notorious criminal. Subsequently, his upright and virtuous father disowned him in disgrace, banishing him to London to enlist in the merchant navy. Life in the capital. William made a genuine effort to fulfill his father's wishes but stumbled at a pivotal juncture. He failed a routine medical examination due to his poor eyesight. However, instead of retracing his steps back to Suffolk, he resolved to remain in the bustling heart of London, intent on testing the waters of self-sufficiency. In hindsight, this decision, though understandable, marked the first in a series of missteps that would ultimately shape William's fate. Much like other young individuals restrained by strict familial controls, William's London sojourn precipitated a yearning for independence. As he ventured into the city's bars and pubs, fate led him to cross paths with a former actress named Hannah Fandango, who had, by that time, adopted a more promiscuous lifestyle. Hannah, with her connections to a smuggling network that clandestinely moved goods through Polstead, soon introduced William to the leader of this covert operation, a man known within criminal circles as Handsome Sam Smith. It's possible that William had already heard of Sam's notoriety, as alternate accounts suggest that William might have assisted Sam in the theft of pigs in Suffolk, purportedly the cause of his banishment to London. If this version of events held any truth, it would make more sense that it was Sam who initiated William into Hannah's acquaintance, rather than the other way around. William's London experience spanned several months, during which he fruitlessly searched for employment. As his financial resources dwindled, he grudgingly acknowledged the failure of his bid for independence, prompting him to decide to return to the familiar confines of the family farm. The return of the prodigal son. Surprisingly, William's father, perhaps influenced by his own declining health, permitted his son to return to Polstead, and by April 1825, William was back to toiling on the family farm. It is highly likely that the deteriorating well-being of his parents played a pivotal role in this decision. As a testament to their frailty, the following winter witnessed William's father and two of his brothers grappling with a severe bout of tuberculosis. Although the two younger siblings managed to survive, their health was significantly compromised, leaving them marked for life. The patriarch of the Corder family, the abusive John Corder, did not share their fate and succumbed to the illness. With the farm officially bequeathed to the eldest son, Thomas, William's return ushered in a significant shift in the dynamics. As the sole remaining able-bodied male in the family, his status and range of freedom naturally expanded to its zenith. Amid this newfound latitude, William found himself drawn to a captivating young woman named Mary Martin, who was a victim of the double standards deeply entrenched in Victorian Britain. These conventions permitted men to pursue multiple relationships while women were subjected to public censure for such behavior. In London, this paradox spawned thriving establishments, with some men actively seeking out women bearing this societal stigma for marriage. Such women were viewed as more docile and devoted, driven by desperation due to limited prospects for a respectable marriage. In rural villages, a similar system of attitudes persisted, albeit on a smaller scale. Mary, once regarded as a virtuous young lady, had been employed by a priest in the neighboring village of Liam at the tender age of 14. However, by the age of 15, she had been dismissed for what was considered frivolous conduct. By 19, she bore an illegitimate child, fathered by William's older sibling, Thomas. Her father's livelihood revolved around trapping moles and crafting gloves from their hides, a vocation associated with markedly lower social status when juxtaposed with the Corder family's standing as farmers. Lovely Maria. In stark contrast to William, Thomas held the esteemed position of being the favored son in the eyes of their father, John Corder. This distinction made the subsequent events surrounding Thomas much easier to conceal and ultimately fade into obscurity, particularly given the unfortunate death of the infant, a sadly common occurrence during that era. Mary, on the other hand, solidified her reputation as the village scandal by bearing a second child out of wedlock, this time fathered by another local landowner, Peter Matthews. Their clandestine affair commenced at a village fair in Polstead, where Peter was the guest of a local squire. Their liaison spanned several months but came to an abrupt end when Matthews discovered Mary's pregnancy. To his credit, Peter agreed to financially support their child, but in return, he demanded that Mary remove herself from his life. At the onset of their relationship, William and Mary maintained the utmost secrecy, choosing remote and secluded locations for their encounters. One of these secluded locales was the Red Barn, a structure likely named for the red tiles that adorned its roof. Although the barn's name later took on a much darker connotation, it was, in reality, just one of several similar buildings scattered throughout Polstead. As time passed, their relationship ceased to be a clandestine affair. William's initial apprehension, stemming from his father's looming presence, gradually waned. Mary's family, perhaps recognizing the budding romance, might have even encouraged it. With William emerging as the de facto head of the Corder farm, he proved to be a rather desirable prospect for Maria, thus sealing their bond. Pregnancy and bad news. In the autumn of 1826, the 24-year-old Mary confronted the reality of her third pregnancy and confided in William. His initial response was one of panic, striving to keep the pregnancy hidden. Yet, as the futility of concealment became apparent, he took a decisive step and approached Mary's parents with a promise to wed her after the child's birth. Tragically, fate took an unexpected turn in February 1827. Thomas Corder, attempting to traverse a frozen lake on his way home from a friend's house, met with a dreadful accident. The ice beneath him cracked, plunging him into the frigid waters where he met his untimely demise. As a result, William ascended to the position of farm owner, a responsibility he was ill-prepared to assume, particularly considering the dire financial straits the farm was in. Mary gave birth to her and William's son in March 1827, a labor fraught with difficulty that left Maria bedridden for an extended period. Sadly, their infant son succumbed to an untimely demise merely 2 weeks after birth. In this trying circumstance, William managed to convince Mary and her parents to keep the birth and their child's passing concealed from the world. Consequently, they discreetly interred their son at an undisclosed location. Escape. Simultaneously, Corder continued to offer the Martins assurances of his intention to marry their daughter, but evidently, he no longer harbored such intentions. Moreover, persistent rumors circulated that local parish authorities were contemplating Mary's arrest for the grievous crime of bearing children out of wedlock, a transgression punishable by a degrading public flogging. Primarily driven by the dread of enduring such a humiliating punishment, William yearned to expunge the relationship and bury it in the deepest recesses of oblivion. In an attempt to escape this oppressive environment, William presented Mary with a seemingly brilliant scheme: to flee to another city where they could live openly without societal censure. Before their planned journey to nearby Ipswich, where they would formalize their union, the couple arranged to rendezvous at the Red Barn on the evening of May 18, 1827. Under the cloak of dusk, Mary, disguised in men's attire, quietly departed her family's abode, leaving her 2-year-old son behind, and set forth toward the Red Barn, situated a kilometer from her home. Tragically, she would never be seen alive again. Several days later, William returned to Polstead, but he was alone. He informed the Martins that a complication had arisen with the marriage license in Ipswich, necessitating Maria to remain there temporarily to resolve the matter. As the days stretched into weeks, William continued to reside quietly on the farm, evading the Martins' inquiries about their daughter's whereabouts, asserting that he was engrossed with farm work and assuring them that things would soon settle down. When the pressure of evading Mary's parents grew too burdensome, Corder eventually disclosed his plan to whisk Maria away to the Isle of Wight. He asserted that this relocation was essential for the recovery of his future wife, who was grappling with a mysterious illness and an arm injury that purportedly rendered her incapable of letter writing. With this explanation, he departed, and on October 18, 1827, the Martins received a letter, bearing the news that William and Mary had finally exchanged vows. The newlyweds had made the decision to divest themselves of the farm, aspiring to embark on a new venture in Newport. Regrettably, this marked the final communication the Martins would receive from their would-be son-in-law. The ghost's message. With the absence of any letters or news from Mary, Anne Martin's maternal concern began to mount, especially considering the close bond they shared while living under the same roof. During the winter, her worries deepened, casting shadows of anxiety in her dreams. It's noteworthy that local whispers hinted at Anne possessing a peculiar gift, the ability to foresee the future through visions. The legend continues that for a considerable time, Anne grappled with hazy, unsettling dreams, often waking drenched in cold sweat, unable to recollect the details. It wasn't until April 1828 that clarity dawned on her. She vividly saw the apparition of Mary, her daughter, who conveyed her tragic fate to her grieving mother and indicated the chilling location of her resting place, beneath the floorboards of the ominous Red Barn. Driven by unwavering determination, Anne successfully implored her husband, Thomas, to approach the barn's owner and request permission for an inspection. Under the floor, precisely where Anne had directed, they discovered disturbed earth. Thomas delved roughly half a meter into the ground and, soon overwhelmed by a pungent odor, grasped that someone had been interred there. More men were summoned, and together they unearthed a bag containing the mortal remains of a woman. Upon closer examination of the tattered garments, Thomas readily identified the deceased as his own daughter, Maria. Furthermore, she was positioned exactly as Anne had described, confirming that the young mother had never left the confines of the Red Barn. Was there a ghost? Undoubtedly, this legend holds a captivating and artistic allure, yet it faces a fair share of skepticism from those who question its credibility. Primary among the doubters are those who argue that Mary's parents harbored perpetual suspicions about William, always regarding him as a potential wrongdoer. In light of this, the Red Barn, standing isolated on the outskirts, seems a glaringly obvious place to commence their search for Mary. Alternate narratives propose that Mary's ghost appeared to Anne to identify her assailant, while some even suggest that she was discovered in a grain silo or concealed within a grain sack, a notion that falters in logic, as her discovery would have occurred far earlier. The cause of Mary's demise remains elusive due to the pitiful condition of her remains. Forensic experts proffer 3 potential causes of death: gunshot, stabbing, or strangulation, but the conclusive verdict remains elusive. Apprehension. The quest to locate William proved to be a relatively brief endeavor. He resided in Brentford, making no effort to conceal himself from the public eye. According to newspaper accounts, he was purportedly managing a boarding house, although certain sources contend that Corder held the position of headmaster at a girls' school. The most astounding revelation was William's marriage, although it was not to Mary. Remarkably, he found his new spouse through an advertisement featured in the Sunday Times, where he portrayed himself as an independent and dependable man, seeking a serious commitment. This description elicited over 100 responses, from which he selected a schoolteacher named Mary Moore. The union was solemnized in December 1827, a mere 6 months following Mary's tragic demise. Despite his arrest, William vehemently denied any knowledge of his former girlfriend's murder. A search of his residence yielded 2 pistols and a French passport, suggesting that he might have been contemplating an escape from the country. Resonance. In no time, the case came to be known as the Red Barn murder, capturing the fervent attention of the public. Mary's funeral, held on April 20, 1828, drew crowds of hundreds, and after the police concluded their investigation, the Red Barn was practically disassembled by souvenir hunters. The heightened interest in the case was hardly surprising, given its intriguing blend of murder, supernatural phenomena, and a clandestine romance. The extensive media coverage of these elements was sufficient to pique the curiosity of a substantial portion of England. Within mere months of William Corder's arrest, several plays and a book inspired by the case were brought to the public. The trial, which took place in Bury St. Edmunds, the county town of Suffolk, was initially slated for the end of July, but had to be postponed until early August. This delay was necessary because the widespread newspaper coverage of the case had made it exceedingly challenging to select an impartial jury. The sheer volume of people eager to witness the trial was so immense that all the local hotels in Bury St. Edmunds were fully occupied, and entry to the courtroom was granted by ticket only. Nonetheless, a number of individuals managed to gain access, leading to altercations over available seats in the courtroom. Court. The prosecution asserted that William never harbored genuine intentions of marrying Maria. They emphasized his criminal history, which was boiled down to an association with Pretty Boy, and an alleged involvement in one of Pretty Boy's misdeeds. Furthermore, the prosecution contended that Maria had been coercing Corder into matrimony, a potentially compromising allegation that could have worked against him. According to the prosecution's narrative, William artfully enticed Mary to the Red Barn, subsequently shooting her and clandestinely burying her beneath the floorboards. The linchpin of the prosecution's case was Anne Martin, their most dependable witness. Fortunately, Anne had the wisdom to refrain from discussing her dreams, even though the newspapers had reported on her visions. Anne provided a detailed account of William and Mary's relationship, including their plans for an escape from Polstead. It appeared that Maria had confided in her mother extensively, and proceeded to relate William's suspicious behavior and the falsehoods he peddled about Mary's continued existence. The testimony of Maria's younger brother, 10-year-old George Martin, carried significant weight. He recounted an incident just before the murder, during which he observed William loading and inspecting his firearms, a pivotal detail in the case. Corder's defense attorney staunchly maintained that Maria had taken her own life following a heated argument, while William did not dispute the fact that he had indeed visited the Red Barn and conversed with Martin. He contended that their meeting concluded with Maria succumbing to hysterics, after which he left, inadvertently leaving behind a box of pistols. According to his account, as he distanced himself by approximately 100 meters, a gunshot rang out, prompting him to hasten back. He claimed to have discovered the lifeless body of his beloved on the floor, thrust into a state of panic and compelled to conceal it. However, his version of events was met with widespread skepticism, and few harbored any belief in his potential acquittal. Remarkably, the jury took a mere 35 minutes to reach their verdict, finding William guilty. Execution. In those times, death sentences were executed with remarkable celerity, often within a mere 3 days. During this brief interval, Corder, at the behest of his wife, eventually offered a confession, admitting to an unintended act of violence driven by a fit of passion. While the veracity of his confession remains uncertain, it held little significance at this juncture. "I'm guilty. My sentence is just. I deserve my fate. May God have mercy on my soul," William uttered before his demise. He met his end before a substantial throng, with crowd estimates varying from 7 to 20,000, depending on the reports. Subsequently, a public autopsy was conducted, attracting a staggering 5,000 spectators, followed by the creation of his post-mortem mask. Subsequent events. The fascination with the case extended far beyond William's demise. Printer James Catnog's pamphlet, which detailed the trial and execution in a newspaper-like format, sold in excess of 1 million copies. The executioner also found a lucrative opportunity, selling pieces of the rope used for the execution for a guinea apiece. A lock of Mary's hair fetched a substantial sum in auction, and souvenir hunters descended upon her tombstone to claim fragments as mementos. Originally intended for educational purposes in a hospital, William's skeleton took an unexpected turn. It was eventually placed on public display, commanding a small fee to raise funds for various, primarily charitable, causes in a rather unsophisticated manner. Notably, Corder's skull found its way into the possession of collector John Kilner. According to Kilner's account, a series of mishaps and supernatural occurrences followed his acquisition of the skull, compelling him to accord it a Christian funeral. The particulars of how he located a willing priest to bury an individual skull remain undisclosed. The skeleton, now fitted with a replacement skull, was displayed for a considerable duration in London's Hunterian Museum, alongside the remains of Jonathan Wilder, the renowned British rogue executed in 1725. However, in 2004, William Corder's remains were removed from the exhibition and cremated. This decision was spurred by an appeal initiated by descendants of the Corder family, emphasizing the importance of ego, or respect for the deceased. Other versions. The tale of the Red Barn murder emerged as a quintessential piece of Victorian England's crime literature, albeit undergoing gradual distortion over time. William increasingly morphed into the archetypical villain, while Mary assumed the mantle of the world's most innocent victim. Corder came to be depicted as a debauched, elderly country nobleman, notorious for his predatory exploits with women. Meanwhile, Mary's past experiences and youthful escapades receded into obscurity, and she was cast as the Lamb of God. With the passage of time, the fact that William was, in reality, 2 years younger than Mary became obscured. Predictably, the narrative served as inspiration for 20th century cinema. The 1935 cinematic rendition was imbued with Victorian melodrama and violence, though it found limited success at international box offices. Subsequently, several more film adaptations followed. In 1967, British journalist Donald McCormick penned a book that delved into William's criminal history. He posited a theory suggesting that the murder had, in fact, been orchestrated by Sam Pretty Boy Smith, with the intention of thwarting Maria from uncovering a covert smuggling operation. Subsequent researchers have criticized McCormick, contending that he immersed himself too deeply in detective fiction, and relied heavily on assumptions in his book, effectively transforming it into a work of fiction. Another prominent book exploring the case was authored by journalist and anthologist Peter Heining. His narrative amplifies the supernatural element, and, albeit lacking substantial evidence, suggests the possibility of Mary being a witch or even a vampire. Among the myriad rumors circulating among the public, one of the most intriguing is the notion that Anne, who, despite her years, retained a striking allure, was clandestinely involved with William. This theory posits that they jointly orchestrated the murder, after which Corder fled. The basis for this theory hinges on Anne Martin's dreams, which allegedly surfaced precisely when she received news of William's marriage. I hope you liked this story. Please don't forget to leave a comment sharing with your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up this video, and remember to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more captivating stories. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey, and we'll see you in the next video.